Welcome to Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel. With helpful travel tips, news and events, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from seasoned and experienced traveling anglers, this is your backstage pass to the world of fishing travel. Waypoints is fueled by adventure and brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing, a hands-on specialty travel and booking company that delivers the industry's very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered. And now your host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
So welcome to Waypoints. I'm your host, Jim Klug. Thanks for joining us today. One of the questions that we get all the time when it comes to traveling to fish revolves around how to get better photographs, how to come home with better images, whether you're shooting a DSLR, a pro level, a consumer level camera, all the way down to just a simple iPhone. One of the great joys of going out and traveling and seeing beautiful places and catching interesting species is coming home with the photos to show friends and family. And it's a topic that I know is very important to a lot of anglers, a lot of travelers. We're lucky enough today to be joined by BRYAN GREGSON, a well-known photographer from throughout the world of fly fishing. BRYAN, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast, Jim.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, BRYAN, kind of what you do and how you would describe your profession.
That's a really good question. I'm a professional photographer and cinematographer. Currently work for Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures as the director of photography, and I have a bunch of other irons in the fires. I work for various industry companies, other collectives, and media agencies.
Well, you're a busy guy. I know that. It's hard to pick up a magazine or any publication in the world of fly fishing and not see the name BRYAN GREGSON, whether it's a cover shot or a double page spread. You're definitely all over the place and have been doing it for a lot of years. So we're excited to tap into your knowledge base here today. Tell me a little bit, BRYAN, about how you found your way to the world of fly fishing.
I found my way to the world of fly fishing probably like most people. I grew up in an angling family. My grandfather and father both fished. We grew up as anglers where we had fly rods and as well conventional gear. So just kind of one step led to the other, and it was something that stuck with me forever.
Well, I know you've worked a lot in the winter sports industry, the action sports game. But what is it about fly fishing as a sport and an activity that kind of sets it apart and makes it different from a photography perspective? What is it about shooting fly fishing that's unlike anything else that you can do?
I think that's a really good question. You get that a lot, and I think that a lot of photographers that are colleagues that I talk to outside of fly fishing have a hard time wrapping their head around this. But we have two huge issues with fly fishing photography. First is we're usually shooting in the worst light. You'll see a lot of these pretty sunset and sunrise images all over, and a lot of those are staged. I hate to say it, but sometimes like, hey, we get that good light, get out there and make a cast. It's really going to look pretty, which is true, it does, but it's not necessarily what's actually happening. For the most part, hatches happen in high noon, and you're on the flats at 8 to 5 o'clock, so you get stuck with a lot of harsh light. And the second most challenging thing we deal with is we're working with an animal. We're coming from snow sports. You have a mountainside you're filming or shooting, or you have a booter that somebody's going to hit, and you can pretty much dial it into the exact time, the exact light you want. Ready, set, go. Action happens, and you can capture it. We're dealt with a lot of hard cards to deal with. Controlling animals, no easy task, especially with permit and steelhead, and dealing with the harsh elements of the sun. And so there's a lot of tricks that you have to learn how to deal with those.
And I would say the elements themselves. I mean, you're working on water, oftentimes in water, always around water. Might be the heat, might be torrential downpours, but you go somewhere on a destination shoot, and you can't always pick what Mother Nature's going to throw at you.
Well, that too. Nature, that's a good three. You can never dictate nature. As much as we try to have all the fancy apps to know what's going on, we absolutely don't.
We haven't figured that one out yet.
No.
That's right. Well, let's talk a little bit about traveling with photo equipment. Now, I've traveled the world with you. We've shot together. I've seen you show up at the airport with 3 luggage trolleys, stuffed with, Pelican cases and duffel bags and tripods and more stuff than you could possibly believe. But talk to us about kind of your general system and how you bring your photo gear to the field.
I'd say on a general rule, less is more for us, and dictating on the shoot, of course. If I'm just generally hopping on a plane or a skiff or a boat or fishing locally, I want to have as less gear as possible, easy to access. So I usually travel with a Pelican 1510. It's easy to go in the overhead.
Good waterproof case.
Yep, it's waterproof. People don't care about your camera gear. They just don't. You care about it, but they don't. So anything you can have as extra padding or hard cases is definitely something you want to have.
So, and that brings up a great point about flying with photo gear. Now, a lot of our listeners are going to say, hey, I've got a camera on my iPhone. It's pretty easy. I put it in my pocket. But anybody that's stepping it up a little bit more, bringing a DSLR body, maybe a couple lenses, tripod, things like that, all of a sudden you're starting to deal with another piece of luggage or more gear. You're dealing with size restrictions, weight limits, smaller and smaller overhead bins on aircraft. Of course, there's the excess baggage fees that get thrown in. Talk to us a little bit about kind of your secrets and techniques for traveling with photo gear and dealing with those limitations.
There's a lot of limitations. Excuse me. There's a lot of limitations with traveling with camera gear. Airlines are pretty lenient as far as bringing your camera gears on board. And so as a rule of thumb, we all try to bring our most expensive things with us. That means, unfortunately, our reels and those types of things have to go into check on. But our carry-ons, definitely camera bodies and lenses. I travel with a Pelican 1510, which is the legal TSA
Approved size.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it goes right above most of the time, it goes right above your head. There's a few times on smaller planes where they're going to want you to check it in the little fancy little cart they have and give you a pink tag.
But usually it's right there.
It's right there.
If it steps to the plane, it's going to make it.
And what I do is I just grab a little lock that I have in my bag and I put it right on top, or zip tie. A few times I've kind of complained enough to where they'll put my Pelican case where the stewardess put their coats.
That's always a good technique. Yeah.
But usually it's they don't care, and you're going to end up putting it on that card to get a pink slip.
That's right. So you mentioned a phrase just a moment ago, the concept of less is more. How do you balance the less is more? You want to go light, you want to go quick and fast. How do you balance that with the need to have all of the right gear as well as backup equipment when you're going to a far off destination where, hey, what you bring for the week is all that you're going to have?
That's always a hard decision to make, especially when you have weight limits. You go into places where they don't care how many pounds you bring in. Maybe you need all the pounds you need in the world, but a lot of places you're limited to, say 50, 80 pounds per person. So you really have to think of the images you need. It does eliminate a lot of prime lenses. You end up having to go to zoom lenses just because you're boat to boat or need the distance, a focal distance of a variety rather than just one. And a lot of times you're limited to basically 3 lenses.
And that brings up a good point. When you're headed to a destination and you're preparing, one of the great things and a technique that I've come to use over the years is I'll do a little bit of research ahead of time. You can go online, you can look at images from the destination to which you're headed. You get a pretty good idea of what there is to shoot, what the landscapes might look like, kind of what you're dealing with terrain and things like that. By doing that research, it allows you to narrow that kit down a little bit, bring the right lenses, bring the right lighting apparatus, whatever it might be, because you have a better idea of what you're going to encounter when you get there. Even if it's the first time you've been to that destination, there's a lot of good materials and research and images that are online that you can prep with ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-production is key to having a good production in the field. Google Images. For those that don't turn off their geotagging, it's helpful for guys like me. And Google Earth definitely gives you kind of a layout of the landscape that you might be faced with, whether if you're trying to get a sunset or sunrise shot and you're stuck in a valley. And then there's a few other apps out there available that kind of tell you the direction of the sun and if you'll actually get it or not.
Well, we also talked a few moments ago about Mother Nature and the stuff that she can throw at you. Let's talk weather issues with camera gear. First off, like heat and humidity. A lot of times if you're headed to the salt or if you're headed to the jungle, you might be coming from a place like Montana where we live, and all of a sudden you go down and it's like trying to shoot photos in a steam room.
Oh yeah. I buy my camera equipment based on one factor usually, and that's toughness. I've seen countless cameras fail in the field, whether it's too cold or too hot, not enough battery life getting sucked out, but you definitely have to deal with the elements. One situation that we see all the time is the salt water, and it's your humidity levels, where you go to sleep in a nice AC room and it's super comfy, and you get a good night's sleep, and you wake up and it's a great sunrise, and you grab your camera and you
Step
had
outside,
inside, and it's foggy.
It's immediately ruined. Yeah.
And it's not gonna clean up in 30 seconds, and you're gonna kick yourself for the 10 minutes of that awesome sunrise.
And you bring up a great point, because every angler that's traveled with a camera to the saltwater, to a hot destination, has dealt with this. You go in, you put your camera equipment back in your room. It's all locked and safe and secure for the night. AC comes on. That's an issue. How do you deal with that?
Well, there's a few ways to deal with that issue. Say you're in a place where you don't want to leave your cameras outside and you want to have them in your locked room. The best thing I can think of is just get your cameras furthest away from the AC unit as possible. This usually means in the corner of the shower, a bathroom, a closet. I ask for extra blankets and pillows, and I kind of insulate my Pelican just to make it as hot as possible. Shut a shower door, isolate something. Sometimes you can stick your camera case in a manager's office, a storage room. You just got to be careful with those to make sure that they're going to be up at 4:30 just like you are.
That's right. We've dealt with that before, for sure. For sure. So we talked about the air conditioning, the big temperature fluctuations. That's really common when you go to the saltwater, any jungle destination, for sure. You talked a little bit about cold. Cold can obviously affect the performance of a camera body, or even an iPhone.
Cold crushes your batteries.
Yeah.
And a trick I learned way back a long time ago, pre-digital cameras, digital cameras definitely suck a lot more battery life than film cameras did, but all the assistants and grips had the old Crown Royal bag filled nicely with the little hand warmers that you get, and all the batteries went in there. You tie it to your belt loop, and they go down your pants. And
so for anybody that's fishing high altitudes in the Himalayas, that'll be a good tip right there. Let's talk about a lot of our listeners are more casual type shooters. Again, they just want to come home with some great photos from the field, regardless of whether they're shooting on a phone or a high-end expensive camera body, DSLR. Give us some key photo tips for the casual shooter, someone who's primarily there to fish, but they also want to capture some good images. What are a couple basic things that people can remember to bring home better images?
That brings up a good point. In this day and age, everybody really wants to get on the manual side of shooting, and that is great, and it's super important for the professionals. But a lot of guys that are not so familiar with their camera bodies or their buttons, when you have to take a shot and it's in the moment, they're fumbling around. And the beauty of these days of these cameras is it's just a turn of a dial. Just put on aperture priority or shutter priority. Pick one thing that you want to capture and modify it within your camera. If you want to catch a jumping tarpon, then just make sure it's on the priority to shoot the fastest shutter as possible. If it ends up shooting at 2.8, at least you got something in focus.
And really, I mean, these cameras are so smart today that if in doubt, put it on the auto mode and let the camera figure it out for you.
Exactly.
Because, like you said, things happen quick, and you go and you grab your camera, you take that shot, and you realize after the fact that the settings were completely wrong. By defaulting to that auto mode, just to have it sitting in your bag, you're rarely going to miss that shot. They're pretty darn smart.
I would agree. And people always are shocked when I say that. Just put on auto. You're going to get the shot you want because it's going to be over in a split second, and you'd either want the shot or you don't get it. And so you'd rather have it. Play with the manual settings. Play with your camera before and after that critical moment. If you're super comfortable with your settings, then by all means, of course, shoot manual. You want to be in as much control of the situation as a photographer as you can. But if you want to get some really good images and you just brought a camera along and you shoot a few times a year, just put it on auto. Make it easier.
So let's dial things back just a little bit. Let's say you're shooting with an iPhone. What are 3 things you can consider to get better photos for the super casual photographer?
I'd say, an iPhone is a pretty easy camera to get really good images. The bad images I see from the iPhone are just using the regular camera app. I would suggest finding a more professional camera app, something you can control a little more. And the biggest thing I see is that nobody cleans their lens. So it's been in their pocket the whole time. It's got all kinds of clutter on it, and they break it out to take a photo, and it's just out of focus. It's fuzzy. It's got stuff on the lens. But if you can get just a Camera Pro app where you can have somewhat of control of your camera, it'll take a better camera photo.
And let's talk about something like basic composition. All right. Yeah, you might have a $5,000 pro level body, or you might be shooting with a camera phone. But taking a moment to compose the photo, making sure that things are framed the right way, and that your subject is also prepared as well. One of my favorite things, I know you and I laugh about this a lot, is the unknown angler, right? The guy gets this beautiful fish of a lifetime. He's got a big floppy hat throwing a shadow on his face. He's got big wraparound sunglasses. He's got his buff pulled up. He's got giant sun gloves on. And he looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that is totally, anonymous because his face is completely covered. And there's this beautiful bonefisher permit that he's holding. So the thought of kind of taking a moment to compose your shots.
Yeah, take a minute. For the most part, fish live really, really well in the water. And so what we always do, we have a plan before we get the fish. Everybody kind of knows what they're going to be doing when we get it. And then we're super calm and we just leave the fish in the water. Just get out of the boat, get the angler to where you need him to be, let him know the direction. The fish is still in the water breathing. You're not holding him, if a net is best, of course. And it's just a simple lift and shoot. And that's it. It takes 5 seconds.
Right back in the water. It's all right. The keep them wet philosophy is more than a hashtag. You actually have to.
You have to keep them wet.
You have to keep them wet.
They breathe better underwater.
And we're seeing that a lot more with the standard grip and grin photos, where you used to see, kind of the Guggen shot of the guy sitting on the bow of the boat, fish on his lap. Fish is clearly dried out. It's not dripping. Well, more and more that's becoming an image of the past. People are waking up to the fact that, hey, step out of the boat, get onto the flats, keep the fish in the water. If you want that quick kind of grip and grin shot, 1, 2, 3, lift, quick shots, fish is right back in the water. Every shot that you see of an angler holding a fish should have water dripping off of that fish.
Yeah, there's no reason why it shouldn't. I think we've learned from the past, and how things were done in the beginning have changed to now, whether it be how we take photos or the tackle that we're using, or even the tactics that we're using. And we're learning as we go. And I think at this stage in the game, everybody wants to have a great experience, a great photo, but it's also a responsibility to make sure that we keep these fish healthy for the next user so that they can have a great experience too.
That's right. And it's easy to do as long as you're aware of what you're doing. And you said something a moment ago that is so key. If you've got a fishing partner in the boat, talk a little bit about the plan. Okay, we're going to land this fish. The guide's going to grab him. I'm going to take, off my buff, take my sunglasses off, remove my sun gloves. I'm going to get out of the boat. I'm going to get down next to it. Meanwhile, the guide is holding the fish. He's going to get you in position. You're going to get your hands wet. You're going to hold the fish. You're going to gently lift him, some photos, right back in. It's pretty simple. When you talk it over ahead of time, you kind of make a plan. And again, the rule being always do what's best for the fish. Yeah, you want the photos, but as you said, you want that fish to survive, and you want to kind of protect what we all have.
Yeah, you got to look out for the next guy too. He's going to want to catch that bonefish, tarpon, and trout, and he wants them in good shape, and the fish wants to be in good shape. It's simple to do. It's an easy process, and most of the guides, I would say almost every single guide that I run into knows the process. They're used to taking photos. All you have to do is just be like, hey, when we get this, let's just get to an area that we can get out. And if he can't get out and he can't make it happen, I just choose not to bring the fish in the boat. I'll lean over the gunnel, or we just get to a place where we can catch another one.
Well, and I know that as part of your classes and the courses that you teach on fly fishing and travel photography, there's actually a session on taking better grip and grin fish photos, which seems like kind of a remedial thing, but we've all seen so many just terrible pictures of people trying to hold fish. And there are certain things you can do, like the way you position your hands, the way you kind of hide your fingers. Again, the fish being either right on the surface of the water or kind of halfway out of the water. What you have showing in the photo, whether it's, giant hands and a floppy hat and, your knees are sticking up as you're kind of squatting down and you look like you're going to the bathroom. There's all these things that you can do to just tighten it up a little bit more and come home with that beautiful fish photo, whether you're, again, shooting it with a camera phone or you've got a professional photographer along with you who's shooting it on the most high-end equipment.
No, you're absolutely right. The more you can be prepared before you get the shot, the better you'll be. Even if you're with your spouse and you know what to do and you know how to hold it and they're using an iPhone, as long as you can kind of walk through the steps with them, you get yourself in a position and just have them hit the focus button and then click the photo. You'll have a better photo. The biggest issues always come with glasses for numerous reasons. One is reflection, so you get the photographer in the background. Yeah. And two, you want to see somebody's eyes. Hats come into a play here. It leaves your face much darker, so we're all taught to expose for skin. And when somebody's got just a black circle around their face because of all the shadows that's kind of going on, you definitely want to get if they don't want to take the hat off, just have them tilt their head back a little bit. Just get some sun on there so you can have an even exposed image. You're taking this whole process to frame it out. You got the palm trees, you got the bonefish, there's the guy in the background, the boat's there, and then your face is totally underexposed.
Yeah, and that a lot of that has to do with the simple direction of where the sun is coming into the angler and where you're lining up to take the shot. That's very basic, but just think about that as you're setting up the composition for the shot as well.
And that scenario usually happens in that 11 to 2 o'clock range when the sun's directly overhead, which we get faced with most of the time.
That's right. Well, talking a little bit about equipment. You're a professional. You've been doing this for years. It's how you make your living. Let's talk a little bit about drones.
Sure.
It's changed the game for photographers. It really has. But, from your opinion, love them or hate them? What do you think about drones?
Drones are a love-hate. When I learned photography, if we wanted a drone shot, we put a camera on a kite. We used a paraglider, which the paraglider would have the cameraman mounted on his chest, and we developed a cable camera system for video. Nowadays, you can just hook it up to your phone and off you go. And drones are great. Drones have given everybody a different perspective, which has been super positive, but drones have also caused a lot of problems. And the U.S. is pretty open with drones as far as just the drone pilot goes. There's definitely a large criteria that you have to follow. I just read somewhere that I think there's 1.6 million drones sold, which is a lot of drones considering.
Yeah, God, where are they all going? Think about that. Holy cow.
I was wondering that myself. But there's other countries have not taken that same stance as the U.S. has. A commercial pilot needs to have... a commercial drone pilot needs to have a Part 107 license now, as far as they're operating for commercial use. But a recreational pilot can fly pretty much anywhere as long as you stay under their guidelines.
But, and as you said, different countries have different rules. There are some places, as traveling
absolutely.
Anglers right now, you just cannot bring a drone.
You cannot. You cannot bring a drone to, Nicaragua, Bahamas, Belize,
Cuba. I can speak from firsthand experience on that.
Yes.
Listeners, do not attempt to bring your drones to Cuba. It's a horrible idea. Trust me on that.
North Korea would be bad.
That's right. It's frowned upon.
And a lot of the Arab countries are not accepting drones. There is ways to get around that as a professional. There are steps to take with the Ministry of Aviation in certain countries.
A lot of hoops to jump through, though.
There's a lot of hoops to jump through.
But bottom line is, if you own a drone, you think you're just going to take it with you on your fishing trip to another country, do your homework, because in some countries it's a really big deal if you're caught flying one where you're not supposed to be, or if you're just not supposed to have it, period.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
But they have been a game changer, and personally, I hate them. I find them super annoying. But like you, I use one for photography. And what it's done is, when you combine it with a kit that's got your DSLR and your lens kit, you've got an underwater housing, so you can show that perspective. and then you have the drone photography, you're really able to deliver three-dimensional kind of storytelling with your photographs. All these different perspectives from, a bird's eye perspective, from what we see as anglers, and then the underwater stuff, which is so cool because you're seeing it from the vantage point of the fish. You're in their environment and seeing exactly what it looks like, which even if you're standing on a flat looking down into the water, there's no comparison for, that underwater photography in that perspective.
Correct. Yep. I think that having air, land, and underwater is important for a photographer. It gives us more tools to use, but you have to be definitely responsible with them.
That's right. And I would just, say the last note on drones is be respectful, because there is nothing worse than when you're in some beautiful place and you're out by yourself in the backcountry and all of a sudden somebody's buzzing you with a drone. Be aware if you're a photographer and you're utilizing a drone, just think about where you are and who else is there, and also considerations like wildlife and things like that.
Absolutely. My team is out of sight, out of mind. Just like our regular cameras. I mean, we're not shoving in people's faces and in crowded areas, and we don't want people to know we're flying drones or shooting photos, just like they don't want to know we're flying drones or shooting photos.
That's right. That's a good approach to take. So one of the things, let's get into some quick and specific technical questions for you, Brian. Again, when we can talk with a professional photographer, we're going to throw some questions out there that the tech nerds and photog fanatics out there are going to appreciate. So I'm going to throw a series of kind of rapid fire Q&A at you here. So those of you who are listening at home, whether you're looking to take your photography to the next level, or you're an aspiring pro photographer that wants your shots in all the fly fishing magazines, go ahead and get out your pencil and prepare to copy on this, because I'm going to throw some questions at Brian here. So if you could bring just 3 lenses with you in your kit, and you've got a DSLR body, what lenses are you bringing and why?
Bringing a wide angle. It's going to be my personal choice is a Canon 16-35. It gives me a wide range to take wide shots, landscape shots, fish shots. I'm going to bring a prime lens, 50 or 100, so I can get portraits, scales, details. And I'm going to bring for the most part, I'm in or around boats, or if I'm waiting, I'm far away, so I'm going to have some sort of a telezoom lens. My go-to is always a 70-200. I use a 1x4 extender, and if I know that I'm going to be like boat to boat all day, then I'm going to bring a 1-400.
Good overall kit for just about every situation.
I would love to be bringing like 400 primes and a whole front prime lens, but I don't have the room, the weight, or the funding.
So filters, important?
Yes. Filters, absolutely important.
Okay. Yeah. What's in your filter kit?
My filter kit might be a little extensive. I would recommend everybody has a polarizer, a good polarizer. My rule of thought here is your lens is only as good as your polarizer. If you have a $2,000 lens and you stick a $20 polarizer on there, you've almost turned your $2,000 lens into a $20 lens. Polarizers can get expensive. You can get a really good one for about $100. Mine costs a lot more, but it's a tool that it's necessary for me. I use a lot of grad filters, NDs, reverse grads, neutral densities, hard stops, and soft stops.
And for those listening, that's a great tool to be able to deploy when you're shooting a landscape scene, let's say, and you've got really kind of hot light, a blown out kind of white sky, where when you shoot that, it's going to blow your whole photo out. So you stop that down using that ND filter, and it allows you to balance things a lot more. Yeah,
as long as you can balance things. That's what even the gradual filters. Sunrise and sunset are classic examples where you have 2 different exposure. You have something that's very, very dark and very, very light. And your goal is to expose all of it, and your camera only wants to expose one of it. So the easiest trick is to put a filter on, a gradual filter, whether it's a hard stop or soft stop, on the hot area, the bright area, to make it all one seamless
integration, basically.
You're right, and you're balancing the photo out to be all the exact same balance, and then you're exposing it for that.
That's right. And then of course a UV filter, very basic but super important, mostly for protection of that lens.
Yeah, I'm a person who tells everybody they should get one, and I don't ever use one. Maybe I should be.
Do as I say, not as I do.
It's kind of one of those things where it's just one extra thing to screw on and off, because most of the time there's already something on the front of my lens. If I was shooting without any protection on my lens on high glass around anything that's impactual sports, especially like fly fishing. I would have something to protect my glass.
Right on. Okay, next quick question here. Best protective case for your gear?
I use two things. I live and die by Pelicans, and I also live and die by f-stop backpacks.
That was my next question. So you got the Pelican. It's great for planes. If you're in a skiff where water's a factor, you can put stuff in there. It's going to be waterproof and well protected, great for traveling. But oftentimes we get to a destination and off you go and you're hiking. Or let's just say you're doing a city shoot that day and you're wandering streets. Toting that big suitcase of a Pelican case around isn't a great answer. So you go with the backpack system, and you like the f-stop.
I do. I go with the backpack system when I'm on the Hill Toe Express, when I'm always walking around. I do it for two reasons. One, for safety. If I'm setting a Pelican case down and turning around to shoot, I'm not really watching my Pelican case. They're very flashy. Everybody knows that there's something very expensive in them. You can't really hide a Pelican case. My backpack is on my back, and I can get in and out of it as I please. And when I'm shooting, it's still on my back.
That brings up a great point on security. I have a good buddy that, when he would fly on big shoots, he would have to check his Pelican cases. And rather than put those through, 4 different transfer flights and random international airports, he used to take his Pelican cases, put them in like an old beat up Frank Costanza suitcase, the kind of thing like your grandparents would carry, and people wouldn't even give it a second look. So that was always a good technique for multiple flights with Pelicans.
We go to the Army surplus store and buy the big green duffel bags that look like they're worth $5 and stick 2 Pelican 1510s in them. And people just think you're poor.
So for photographers that are working on putting their kit together for going out on a great destination trip, tell me a couple random items, a few random things that most people overlook when they're packing for a trip or preparing for a shoot.
With fly fishing specifically, I think people overlook a few things. One is the blower and the function of a blower. For some reason, it's like got stuck in your head that you just blow off bits of dust. But we get a lot of water on our lens, and you only have so many lens cloths. So you have a choice. You can either saturate all your lens cloths right away at 8 in the morning because your camera got splashed, or you can use the blower and blow off all the water and then use the lens cloth.
That's a great
idea. And I think it just gets overlooked. I think everybody has most everything they need. It's just they're not maybe utilizing everything properly. Mm-hmm. I think a tripod is overlooked. I think it's something that everybody leaves at home because it's like, well, I don't really need it. I'm never going to use it, and I don't see a purpose of it. I have it because you have to have one to be a photographer. But I would say bring your tripod. It's definitely important. And just having as many lens wipes as you possibly can. Even if you're go to Amazon.com, buy 100 of them just throw them and keep throwing them in your Pelican. They don't weigh anything, and they're worth gold.
That's right. And you brought up a tripod. That's such a great piece of equipment. I learned early on that bring it with you and use it, because especially if, any shot that you're taking, especially landscape shots, cityscapes, nature shots, taking the time to put that camera on a tripod, that is what's going to deliver tack sharp images. You can have the most expensive lenses in the world, but if you're doing it all handheld, oftentimes the situation dictates that. But if you have the opportunity to put that camera on a tripod, you are going to get better shots. For sure.
Even if it's a monopod, it's just something to add stabilization, especially if you're shooting a focal length of over at 200 or above. If you have a telezoom and you're super cranked in at 200 and the boat's bouncing up and down, that's one thing. But say you just ran down the beach, you're breathing hard, and you're at 200, you're going to get some shake in there, even if your shutter speed's maximum capacity. But usually when that happens, it's in low light, so you're going to need that tripod.
That's right.
And you're going to miss out on a lot of great shots, the evening shots, the morning shots, the pre-sunrise and the right after the sunset.
Low light.
You're going to miss all the cool shots if you don't have a tripod.
Yeah, bring it. And there's so many good travel tripods out there that are lightweight, that are durable, that are, able to handle the demands of a saltwater environment. But find the right one and bring it with you and use it. I mean, I think that's one of the most invaluable pieces of advice for photographers.
I think so too. I think the tripod gets overlooked for a few different reasons too. And one of the other reasons is they don't want to stick it in the saltwater and ruin it. I've definitely been the person who stuck a very, very expensive tripod in the saltwater and froze it.
Yeah.
You have to clean them. You have to take all apart. They all come apart. You just have to clean them. Those little alcohol wipes that you brought a bunch of are going to come in handy. Just do it after each day. And what I do is when I get done shooting at the end of the day, I literally walk into the shower with everything that I'm wearing, including my underwater housing and my tripod. And I rinse out my underwater housing. I rinse out my tripod. I rinse out my clothes, because people might be wondering why I'm saying that, but I carry so much gear that I'm limited on clothes. I have 2 shirts and 2 pants. And so you kind of rinse and clean one up the one day, and then you can kind of get into your other gear for the next day.
And we all appreciate that, by the way. That's perfect.
You got your one collared shirt for supper.
That's right. So tell me a story, Bryan, about the craziest situation that you've ever found yourself in when on assignment or out in the field shooting.
The craziest thing is going to come with snow sports. One is dealing with avalanches. Those are super humbling moments. And then one where I was filming, we were running a cable camera, and this was way back when. And our cable camera was putting the camera operator onto the cable itself. And this was filming with 16 millimeter film, pre-digital. And we were in charge of how fast and when the camera operator stops. And he wanted to go further to capture this snowboarder jumping off a cliff and to get 2 pow turns at the end. And it was like, well, we're running thin on timing, because you can't just stop abruptly because the camera will shake. So it has to be a nice gradual slow. Picture a zip line, and the camera guy's on the zip line going all the way to the bottom, and there's 2 guys with this pulley system slowing him down. And so we couldn't really see him, and we allowed it to go the other 5 seconds. And by the time we counted to 5, our rope was slack, which meant that he hit the trees going full speed. And so he ran to the edge, and sure enough, he's hanging up by our safety lines and wearing a harness, and his camera's ripped out and hit the ground. And at this point, we don't know if we got the shot because it's film. We don't know if the camera's broken. We don't know if
your cameraman's
dead, and we don't know how bad we're in trouble. Good thing is that we got the shot. The cameraman didn't die, and we didn't get too bad of a tongue lashing.
Well, that's good. How about fishing wise? I mean, you've been to some crazy places on assignment and to shoot, both for Yellow Dog and for a lot of the other things that you do. What are some of the craziest places you visited with camera in hand to chase fly fishing?
I know I've gotten pretty lucky with fly fishing. Knock on wood here. Because I find myself in a lot of very, very remote places. I say Guatemala, jumping into the ocean, just kind of, I've been around the ocean a long time. I lived in Hawaii for a long time. I've kind of gone through the lifeguard training. I'm very familiar with being in the water. And I just jumped in without realizing, where I was. It's 3,000 feet below. I don't have a life jacket on. I'm swimming all the way out to this pile of debris that they're going to be circling this bait around to try to drop a sailfish. I get back in the boat, and it was really cool. I'm like, wow, that was awesome. Like, do you want me to drive the boat, Captain? Why you do that? And he's just like, I would never do that. And proceeded to show me a bunch of pictures of the marlin getting chopped in half by sharks. It's like, note to self, maybe think about doing it differently next time rather than swimming a half mile away from the boat.
Anything for the shot, right, Bryan? That's good. So, you teach these photo schools and workshops for Yellow Dog. Tell us a little bit about these programs and where they take place and who they're really designed for.
Right. Yeah. We put together a very extensive and intricate Photoshop workshop, more or less. This basically designed for anybody, from the person who just bought a camera that doesn't know where the power button is to the advanced shooter. But it's very geared toward the person who already shoots or wants to shoot. And it's very extensive. We took about a year to put the whole packet together. And we can take someone who has never taken a photo before, and by the end of the week, they can open up any magazine and roughly tell me how it was taken, the shutter stops, the f-stops, and kind of what the photographer was looking for.
And these are week-long courses.
They are. They're week-long courses.
It includes everything from like the basics of composition, shutter speed, using natural light to your advantage, all the way to file handling and some post-editing and whatnot. But it's a kind of an immersive course that obviously focuses around fly fishing and travel, and takes place in some pretty cool places, pretty cool destinations.
Yeah, every day there's classroom, every day there's an assignment, and every day there's hands-on training. This year we're doing it in Belize. We do it at El Pescador on Ambergris Cay. We've hosted there before. It's a great location. They can accommodate a very large group very privately, and we're not in the way. We don't feel like they're in the way, and there's nobody in our way.
And there's tons of stuff to shoot.
Tons of stuff to shoot.
It's a really cool, like immersive classroom.
Yeah, we do, a few days on the water. We do a few days in the traveling, like cultural experience. We go swimming with the sharks and the stingrays and do catamarans. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of fun.
And it's a great way for even the casual angler or casual photographer or even intermediate photographer to really up their game by participating in this.
Absolutely.
Open to everyone.
So I've gained a lot of long life friends from that. I still talk to all the students.
Yeah, it's a neat program.
They're
for
awesome.
Sure. So kind of a couple into show takeaways here, Bryan. Give me 3 key things that our listeners should remember when it comes to fly fishing photography and traveling with their cameras.
I would say number 1, take your time with getting the photo, have a plan beforehand, and execute it. The simplest thing is just get the light behind you, get some light on their face, have them keep the fish wet until you're ready, and then click the shutter.
And one thing that you've talked a lot about in the past is when you're going on a trip, let's say you're going to Alaska for the week, come home with some great photos that tell a story. Don't just come home with a handful of fish pictures. Shoot the scenery where you are, the lodge, the guides, the people, the float planes, elements of the journey to the lodge and from the lodge, all the things that combined, when you put that collection of images together, after the trip and show your friends that weren't there, let it tell a story. Yeah,
that's a very good point. And the photographer will be happy that they did that, because they're going to get home and look back in 5 years and just have 12 pictures of the bonefish.
Yeah, grip and grins are great, but there's so much more that you can come home with.
But take the time to just take a break from the travels and just look around and just use your camera to take the simple little photos that are actually the big photos that like you said, tell the story.
That's right. So last question for you, Bryan, and I like to ask this of everybody: why fly fishing?
That's a very good question. Fly fishing for me is just... it's what I've done since a kid. It's what I know. It's a way just to everybody's going to say the same thing, but you just when you're fly fishing, you're not focused on anything but the fish. You can kind of just let everything else go.
Take in where you are.
And I've chosen to do that as my profession, so that's how I am.
Well, and you've done well at it. So congratulations for putting together an amazing career and a very interesting path.
It takes a lot of irons in the fire, and it takes a lot of help from a lot of people. So I feel very fortunate.
Well, that's great. So Bryan, let me ask you, where can people see more of your work, contact you, or learn more about the fly fishing and travel photography schools that you host every year?
People can contact me on BRYAN GREGSON Photography. There's contact information. I'm pretty good about getting back to everybody who reaches out to me. To learn more about the fly fishing photography schools, yellowdogflyfishingadventures.com. There's a whole page dedicated to it. It's also on my website as well.
Yeah, so we got BryanGregsonPhotography.com, and we've got yellowdogflyfishing.com. We've got pages for the photography schools, and I would encourage everybody that hasn't visited Bryan's site to go check it out. The galleries that he has from having shot fly fishing all around the world are second to none. They're some of the coolest things you will find on the web. But with that, I want to say thank you to Bryan for joining us and for being here today. Thank you to our listeners. Be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com with all of your travel questions to learn more about the programs. And remember, as we like to say on Waypoints, whenever you have the chance, get out there and go, because no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more trip updates, travel news, expert advice, and adventure profiles.